This story happened in the summer of my 15th birthday. My sister, who was my best friend, my whole world, was 17 going on 18. This happened in August, and Lim would have turned 18 that Christmas. Lynn had met this guy that worked at our local nature preserve, which was less than 5 miles from our home. She asked me if I wanted to go, but I told her no, as I was feeling sick for the first time that I can remember. I never had colds growing up, so it crushed me that I couldn't go. Let me take a second here to explain something to you all. My sister and I had such an amazing friendship and loved being sisters. So when she didn't come home that night, I knew something wasn't right. My parents notified the police the next morning, but because she was 17, they didn't rush to help. So instead we waited. The weekend passed, and on the Monday, I took it upon myself to go to the preserve and speak to the guy that went out with my sister. I left the park with an uneasy feeling. That same night, I had the oddest thing happen to me. I dreamt my sister was standing at the foot of my bed, telling me to come find her. I woke up crying and scared, freaked out by my own dream. I sat in perfect silence until my dad woke up for work. I talked to him about my dream and the sickening feeling I had at the bottom of my stomach. He woke up my mom, and in turn she woke up my older brother and called my older half-sister, who took all of us, me, my mom, my brothers, and my half-sister to the park. Once there, I set my family to one side of the lake and I went to the other side. Now, keep in mind it's the middle of August, so it was extremely hot. While walking down the main trail, I caught the scent of something so awful and putrid that it couldn't be anything but death. In some form or fashion, I just wasn't ready for what exactly it was. I turned my head to where the scent rose from and somehow skid down the bank and was face to face with what was the cause of the smell, and I could have sworn I looked into my sister's blue eyes. That wasn't possible. They were gone. Her skin was swollen and bruised and unrecognizable, but in my heart, I knew it was her. You see, her date and 5 of his buddies raped and beat her to death, then took her to the park to hide her body. They pulled out most of her nails and tortured her in so many vile ways. By the time I found her, she had laid there for at least 2 to 3 days. Animals had started eating her fingers and toes. They beat and kicked her so hard in the face that some of it was busted. I wish I could say they got what was coming to them, but as far as I know, they never did, so I just kinda kept out of sight since then. I grew up knowing what I had seen, and I could never forget it. I'm scared from my past, and I'm still trying to learn how to forgive myself for not going that night, and for them for what they did. A little bit of a backstory. As a kid, me and my brother would mess around with witchcraft. We were curious to see if the magic actually worked. We even tried to summon a demon. That was a big mistake. We should have never messed with it because I believe we opened the door. Ever since then, I have seen ghosts, black shadows, and other paranormal things. So me seeing this did not surprise me. But it does scare me, because I have heard if you have seen your doppelganger, it is not a good sign. So one day when I got off work, I stopped by my aunt's house to pick up my daughter. From there, I drove to the apartment complex I was staying at the time. I did not have my garage key, so I had to drive all the way around the complex from the first gate to get to my apartment. So as I'm passing by, I turn to look at my porch, and I see my then boyfriend Eric, dressed in all black with a black cap on, standing in a weird stance, just staring at the ceiling. I told my daughter to look at Eric. What is he doing? She looked at the porch and just said, "Where? I don't see him." At the time, I'm coming around the corner to my garage and I see Eric standing in the garage with his friend Anthony. He had on a completely different outfit. He had on a red and white plaid shirt with blue jeans and no cap on. So when I parked my car and got out, I asked him, "Were you just standing on the porch?" He said no, and that him and Anthony had been standing in the garage talking for at least 30 minutes. I told him I had just seen him standing on the porch. Him and Anthony looked at me weirdly, and Eric said he did not believe me. It literally takes 2 seconds to get from my front porch to my garage, so it would be impossible for him to change that fast. So fast forward a couple weeks later, the same friend Anthony was in the garage with Eric that day. He said he was walking by our apartment and saw a man dressed in all black sitting on our porch. He said he was just staring at him blankly and that he got chills as he walked by. And the weird thing is, we weren't home that day. I no longer live there and have not seen this apparition since then, and I hope I never do again. Up until this happened, I didn't believe in ghosts. I lived on the top floor of a newly developed loft apartment in a 10-story, 100-plus-year-old building in downtown St. Louis. My mattress and box spring was on the floor, as I had no bed frame. One night, as I was about to go to sleep, I happened to open my eyes and was startled to see a little girl in a white dress kneeling at the foot of my bed, just looking at me. My heart jumped, and I rubbed my eyes in disbelief, trying to make some rational sense of what I was seeing just 3 feet away from me. I rubbed my eyes for a split second, and she was still there, just watching me. I could see her face and clothing perfectly, glowing in what I could only describe as a molecular energy. About 5 seconds into the entire encounter, she vaporized into what looked like molecules that comprised her, just fell to the floor and disappeared. I did not believe in ghosts, nor could I come up with any other rational explanation, so I pulled the covers over my head and went to sleep. I never told anyone out of fear people would think I was crazy. I also never had any other experience the rest of the time I lived there, which was about another year. About 2 years after I moved out, I attended a Halloween party with the girl I was dating. Not knowing many people there, I just sat on the couch and listened to the conversations going on around me. Behind me there was a group of girls telling ghost stories, and one of them says, "Did you guys ever hear about the little girl that bounces pennies off the floor on the 10th floor of the art loft?" That was the building I had lived in, and that's when I saw her. I immediately jumped up and asked her to repeat what she just said, the hair on my neck standing as I realized other people have seen her too. Validation. She wasn't bouncing pennies or anything that night in my room, just watching me with a non-menacing face of a little girl around 5 years old. She obviously wasn't trying to scare me, but she did. I was around 23 when this happened, and I'm 45 now. I've never seen another ghost, but there's not a doubt in my mind what I saw that night was real. So the creepiest thing happened to me. I was at my grandparents' house, and my room was in the basement, and I'm about 16 at this time. There is a graveyard literally 100 meters up from the hill, if that matters to you. It doesn't to me, but some friends tell me that's important. It's not that big of a deal, but one night, I woke up and I could distinctly hear breathing from across the room. This made sense to me because my dog was a 100-pound moose of a boy who snored. I assume my Nana let him in my room to sleep. I wake up the next morning and my door is still closed. My room is empty. I hear my Nana getting up and letting my dog out. So who was breathing heavily in my room last night? To be clear, this was a remote area where only 1,000 people lived, far away from any city. People leave their doors unlocked all the time, and have no fear. And in this case, I was in a house locked down like a fortress. When I was 8 months pregnant, my husband and I decided to rent this little house that needed a lot of work before we could move in. Also, the landlord had just evicted the former tenant a few days before showing us the house. What we didn't know was that she was extremely mentally ill. Instead of curtains, she hung up dirty, stained pieces of ripped up sheets over the windows. Some of the sheets looked as though they had bloodstains on them. I have no idea if that's what was on them, but they were very disturbing to look at. The first thing I did after we were given the keys to the house was take down those filthy sheets. I threw them on a mattress the former tenant had left behind on the living room floor. We made a deal with the landlord that required us to clean out all the shit she had left in the house in exchange for a no move-in fee. So the next night we head over with our truck so we could begin hauling out the trash. We pulled up to the house, and the first thing I noticed were those same nasty sheets hanging back up over the damn windows. My husband and I look at each other in shock and confusion. I was nervous about going inside, but I wanted to know what was going on. We unlock the door and go inside with our flashlight because the house was pretty dark and the power was shut off. We took a few steps inside, and I suddenly stopped while my husband continued forward to look around with the flashlight. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw some movement and turned to see the woman on the mattress trying to sleep. I called out to my husband and yelled, "What the fuck are you doing here, lady?" She abruptly jumped up and ran straight at me. I thought she was going to attack me or try to get out the door behind me, but instead, she passed right by me and headed into the bedroom directly in front of me where my husband had entered. The house was oddly designed. There was another door in the bedroom that led to the kitchen with the bathroom being right off to the side of it. So my husband had gone through the door and into the kitchen and back around to the room where the mattress was and then into where I stood. We both approached her in the bedroom and told her we were calling the police. She just said, "No, please don't do that," then proceeded to place her hands all over the wall and started to chant, "Please God, help God, please God, help God," non-stop. Cell phones were not a thing back then, so we had to go find a telephone. We left to do that and we called the cops. We drove back to the house to wait for the cops, and they pulled up and got out, and here comes the crazy woman. She ran like her ass was on fire right past all of us. The police chased and apprehended her and took her to jail. We thought that was the end of her. We were wrong. A week later, we began moving our stuff in slowly. We hadn't been sleeping there yet, just taking over loads of our belongings each evening after my husband got home from work. On the last night of moving in, we took over my hamster in his cage and put him on the bathroom counter where he'd be safe, and we closed the door. We also had 2 cats, and I didn't want them to be able to get to my little buddy, obviously. So I made sure the bathroom door was securely shut before we left. The next day we go inside and see that the cats are missing. Then I see the bathroom door open. I immediately rush in there and see the lid open on my hamster's cage, and my hamster was gone. That psycho bitch had broken into my house again. She stole my hamster and set my cats free. We wound up getting my cats back, but no idea whatever happened to my hamster. We immediately called the cops again. I wasn't about to stay there until she was taken back to jail and this issue has been dealt with. I really didn't want to whoop her ass at 8 months pregnant, but it was quickly getting to that point. They either do something or I will. So we get a call the next day from the cops telling us that they had her in custody. Apparently the neighbors called them because she was sitting on the front porch of our house completely naked. After that, we threw in the towel and moved out. I felt like that nightmare was never going to end. Enough was enough. I still remember her first name, Alice. Crazy ass Alice. Long, stringy hair, and skeletal skinny. I wonder if she's still breaking into that house today. I often think about Cotton, my hamster. It's probably best I don't know what she did with him. It was July 4th, about 11 years ago, and at the time I lived in North Carolina in a small, quiet town. I was spending the holidays with my parents and my friend Stella and her parents. Me, Stella, my mom, and Stella's mom all went inside for whatever reason. There was apparently something odd going on. They told Stella and I to sit against the wall, facing the front door, while they were trying to figure out what was going on. Now, my house was set up where you walked in the front door, and there was a room to the left and stairs to the right, while the kitchen was straight ahead, but it went behind a wall where you couldn't see what was at the front door. All the lights were off in the house, except for the kitchen light and the outside light by the front door and garage. The room we sat in had a little light, while my mom and Stella's mom were freaking out and frantically checking the house. My dad and Stella's dad were outside. They had no clue what was going on, as they were talking about whatever creepy thing had just happened. I was staring at my front door, and suddenly, a tall man came up to the front door, and he just stood there. His body was outlined by the light, while his face was lit up by our porch light. I had no clue who he was. I was mortified, frozen in my spot. He was staring in the window, and I swear we made eye contact, even if it was dark. He had this cold stare on his face. Why was he there in the open? I was terrified. Stella wasn't looking at the door. She kept her head down, I'm sure out of fear. Being so young, I had no courage to stand up and say something to my parents. I just sat there, staring at this man while he stared back. A minute went by, and this man had decided to turn around and walk away. That's when my mom and Stella's mom came downstairs, and they took us outside with them, and they told our dads that someone had been in the house. The man had apparently been hiding behind the shower curtain in my parents' bathroom. There was dirt from shoes on the bathroom floor, and the curtain had been messed up. I was in complete shock. My dad and Stella's dad went out with a gun, searching our property. Our moms called the police, and by the time they got there, the man had been long gone. I had hoped, at least. Years later, I was talking to my family about the incident. It had just come up in conversation. I don't know why. I guess I had never actually told them what I saw. That man still haunts my dreams. The man who made me paranoid and still makes me feel that way today. I told my family, and they weren't sure if they should believe me or if it was just my childhood brain making things up, but I knew what I saw. I still do. As far as I know, no one has ever been arrested for breaking into our house. I no longer live in that state, but I still think about the incident every once in a while. And of course, I always check behind the shower curtain before I lock the bathroom door. I used to work as a laborer on a rural property in Oregon. I would ride my bicycle 20 miles out to the property early in the morning to start work at sunrise. One morning, I was a few miles from the property, pedaling down a small dirt road on my way there. I was daydreaming and relaxed, listening to music on my headphones. Suddenly I looked up, and a deranged man was jumping out from the trees directly into my path. He had long, stringy, grayish hair and a hideous face with bulging eyes, a big nose, and a scraggly beard. His mouth was wide open, baring his teeth, and it looked like he was shouting something, but it just sounded like gibberish. He was average height and very thin, wearing a faded denim jacket and jeans, and he was swinging a large hunting knife with a curved blade. I was shocked and swerved to avoid him. As I passed, he wheeled around and swung the knife at me. He missed, and I cranked down hard to get away. At a safe distance, I looked back to see he was still standing in the road, swinging his arms around over his head. I was numb for a few minutes before a shudder of fear ran through me and I considered what had just happened.